Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Imagine this, you retire and you start pulling 4% a year from your portfolio and you fund a 30-year retirement. And at the end of it, not only do you not run out of money, but history shows that the median retiree would end up with 3 times the amount of money they started with. That's not a typo. Michael Kitces, one of the leading retirement researchers, found that using U.S. market history, the typical retiree following the 4% rule finishes with about 2.8 times their starting portfolio after 3 decades of withdrawals. More than 2/3 of the time, retirees more than doubled their wealth. And in 96% of cases, retirees end up with at least as much money as they started retirement with in nominal terms. So why is everyone so worried about running out of money when history shows us it's usually the opposite that happens? The 4% rule was not designed for the average retiree. It was built to withstand the absolute worst case scenarios, the Great Depression, stagflation of the 1970s, and the brutal decade that started in 2000. The question researchers asked was simple. What withdrawal rate would withstand the ugliest 30-year period in history? And the answer came back at about 4%. That's why we call it the safe withdrawal rate. It is the floor. It's not the average, and it's certainly not the ceiling, but rather the minimum level history suggests would keep your portfolio intact through the very worst return sequences we've seen. And here's a part I find absolutely fascinating. Bill Bengen, considered the father of the 4% rule, also studied the best case scenarios in market history. And if you had retired at the absolute best time in US history, which would have been 1982, and retired for 30 years, your portfolio would have sustained a 13% withdrawal rate. Think about that. $1 million portfolio generating $130,000 annually, inflation adjusted, without running out of money. Of course, that doesn't mean we're going to go ahead and use 13% as a starting withdrawal rate and consider it safe. Not at all. But it does show us a wide range of outcomes depending on when you retire. Across all historical periods, the median sustainable withdrawal rate was closer to 6 or 6.5%. And while median numbers certainly aren't guarantees, it does show us something important, that most of us will not retire at the very best moment in history, but we also likely won't retire at the absolute worst time in history. For most of us, we will fall somewhere in between. And that's really the essence of the 4% rule. It's about avoiding failure, because none of us want to run out of money in retirement. Here's where things get really interesting. If you don't retire into one of those nightmare situations, the 4% rule ends up being overly conservative. The median outcome? Almost 3 times your starting wealth. In the modern era, since the 1920s, the median is closer to 3.7 times your starting wealth. And 1/3 of the time, retirees finished with more than 5 times their starting wealth. In other words, the 4% rule is so cautious that it tends to leave retirees with a massive unspent upside. Michael Kitces puts it this way. With the 4% rule, there's a 96% chance you'll finish retirement with at least as much money as you started in nominal dollars. Think about what that really means. If you retire with $1 million in investments, there is a 96% chance your heirs will inherit $1 million or more after you've supported yourself for 30 years. And the median inheritance, it would be closer to $2.8 million in this situation. In fact, 1/3 of the time, the heirs would receive $5 million or more. This is essentially legacy math. The amount you retire with isn't just your lifestyle fund, it essentially becomes the baseline amount you will pass on to your heirs. This raises some really important questions. Do you really want to leave this much wealth behind by default? Or would you rather spend more during your retirement? Would you rather gift more to your loved ones while you're alive or to causes that you care about? That way you could see your gifts in action. Now, of course, there is no right answer, but these are questions that you absolutely want to think about. Let's play this out with a $1 million portfolio. Retiree A follows the strict 4% rule. They withdraw $40,000 in the first year, and they adjust each year for inflation. They stick to that plan. After 30 years, history shows the median outcome would leave them with about $2.8 million. They had 30 years of income from this portfolio, plus they end up with nearly triple the nest egg of what they started with. Retiree B, let's call them the ratcheter. They also start with the 4% rule, but every 3 to 5 years, they check their balance. If the account balance has grown, they ratchet up by spending 10 to 20% more. For example, if the portfolio grows from $1 million to $2 million, they may bump their withdrawals from $40,000 to say $48,000 or even $55,000. Over time, this could mean enjoying 20 to 30% more income in good markets while staying safe when things turn down. And retiree C, we'll call them the big spender. This retiree wants to live larger and plan to spend 6 or 7% of their portfolio per year, so $60,000 or $70,000 annually on a $1 million portfolio. This bigger lifestyle could mean more travel and more gifts, but it does come with more risk. If the markets stumble early on, it could absolutely mean that this retiree would need to make some big cuts later. To protect against that, retiree C might keep a cash buffer or a bucket with 2 to 3 years of living expenses. That way, they're not forced to sell investments in a market downturn. They might use a guardrails approach, spend more when the markets are strong and less when the markets are down, but they're willing to be flexible with their spending. They may also be prepared to reduce discretionary spending. If the markets hit an extended rough patch, maybe they cut back on things like vacation, their hobbies, their extracurricular activities, or any home upgrades they had planned. These are 3 different approaches, all starting with that same $1 million balance. The key is knowing what you value most. Do you want maximum security? Or do you want maximum flexibility with your lifestyle? Or do you want to front load your spending while accepting more risk? Let's explore the Spend Your Upside framework. How do you know when it's safe to give yourself a raise in retirement? Here's a simple rule of thumb to follow. If after 5 years your portfolio is still worth at least what you started with, even after withdrawals, you can safely increase spending. This echoes Michael Kitcey's ratcheting withdrawal research. The key here is to set a checkpoint every 3 to 5 years where you check your account balances. If it's lower than where you started, stay the course. You're still safe at your original withdrawal rate. If it's grown beyond where you started, you've earned some breathing room. You can permanently raise your annual spending by 10 or 20% without jeopardizing long-term safety. Let's put numbers to it. Suppose you retire with $1 million and start withdrawing $40,000 a year. 5 years later, after withdrawals, your balance has grown to $1.1 million. Under the ratcheting framework, you might boost your annual spending from $40,000 to $44,000 or $48,000. And here's the key. This increase, it's permanent. You don't have to lower it again if the markets get choppy. You're locking in this upside without increasing the risk of running out of money. That's the beauty of this framework. It protects you from being overly cautious because too many retirees underspend and die with a large portion of their portfolio unspent. By checking your balance every few years and rewarding yourself if the markets are strong, you're giving yourself the permission and freedom to enjoy everything you've worked so hard to build. Another powerful way to protect yourself and unlock more upside is flexibility. Retirement isn't about picking a rigid plan and sticking to it at all costs. Instead, it's about knowing where you can bend without breaking. Here are 3 questions that test your flexibility. Can I cut spending temporarily if markets crash? Maybe that means postponing a new car purchase, or maybe that means taking a less expensive vacation. Even small temporary cutbacks can dramatically improve the long-term outcome of your portfolio. Can I pause inflation adjustments in bad years? Instead of automatically giving yourself a raise when you have these tough markets, you hold back by the amount of inflation. This may feel like keeping your spending steady and not having too much of a cut, but again, it does dramatically increase the outcome of a portfolio long-term. It's one of those adjustments that may not feel like a major sacrifice, sacrifice? Can I shift discretionary spending like travel, home projects, or gifts without touching essentials? If you can truly separate your must-haves from your nice-to-haves, you'll know exactly where you're capable of making cuts. And here's the nuance. You don't need to say yes to all three of these boxes. If you can even check the box yes on one, you've already built resilience into your plan. Flexibility acts like a shock absorber. It softens the blow when markets hit a rough patch, while leaving the door wide open to increasing spending again once things recover. Here's the message I really want to drive home. You worked for decades to build this wealth. Don't let fear keep you from enjoying it. Money is just a tool, and its purpose is to help you live the life you want. It is not meant to be hoarded or admired from afar. The goal isn't to die with the biggest account balance. The goal is to afford the life you dreamed of living, and if you can do that, you've won. History shows that 2/3 of the time, retirees die with double what they started with. The median outcome is almost triple. And in nearly every case, heirs inherit at least as much as the retiree began with. And I love the idea of leaving a legacy behind for your loved ones. But that legacy shouldn't come at the expense of you enjoying everything you've worked so hard for. There has to be a balance. So ask yourself, are you living the retirement you've always dreamed of? Or are you accidentally stockpiling wealth for your heirs? Not because you want to, but because you're afraid to spend. And before we wrap up, it's really important to add some perspective because, as always, we have to be fair to the data. Historical returns aren't guarantees. All of these numbers are based on U.S. market history, and the future might look very different. Keep in mind, nominal versus real dollars. That 90% figure, that's nominal dollars. Inflation has a way of eroding your purchasing power, and $1 million today will not have the same purchasing power 30 years from now. Sequence risk is very real. Those worst case start dates, like 1929 or 1966, were absolutely brutal. You never know what market environment you'll retire into, which is why it's so important to build safety measures into your plan, no matter what withdrawal strategy you use. And flexibility matters. As Kitces emphasizes, being willing to adjust in those tough markets. Maybe that's pausing your inflationary raise. Maybe it's cutting discretionary spending or just tightening your belt really goes a long way to improving the long-term outcome of your portfolio while still allowing you to capture the upside when the market is up. The 4% rule has been criticized, misunderstood, and debated for decades. But when you look at the full picture, one truth stands out. History shows it's not just about survival, it's about giving you confidence. Confidence that your plan could weather the worst markets we've ever seen in history. Confidence that you'll probably end up with more wealth than you ever started with. And confidence to spend your money to live the life you've always wanted. Retirement isn't about clinging to every single dollar. It's about balance. It's about spending your money to enjoy the life you've worked so hard to build. It's about leaving a legacy for your heirs. It's about finding a way to balance it all. You've worked hard for your wealth. Now's the time to make your wealth work hard for you. What are your thoughts on the 4% rule and its conservative nature? Share them in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. Underspend and die. That's a sentence. I'm so sorry. I hate using the word die in my scripts. I really do. And I don't have a better alternative because I tried once to say end retirement. And the pushback I got on it, rightfully so. Like, who says end retirement? We all know what we mean there. But I don't know what to say instead of die or death because I feel like that's a downer. So if you have some ideas for me, leave it down below. I just didn't know what to say. Underspend and die. So that's what we're going with today. So sorry about that.